This is awesome because you got to remember. So this is
Yeah,
the beginning of back
cloud.
then. We're on the maturity level of virtualization and hypervisors, and back in the old days, you had to identify what hard drives and where something was located. It was like what rack. So, um, along with the device. So we used to just make up numbers. Is this being recorded? No, because the authorizing officials wanted to know where the virtual device was hosted. We're like, rack 6, blade 7. Like, and so we would just put. Well, ideally, it was somewhere in that area.
He just said rack 7 blade 65.
But to I guess to talk about the tools, I mean, as we move towards what eventually or what had already been categorically defined as cloud, and I think there was a guy at Salesforce that got credit for that because he put it on a diagram and drew a cloud around it and so on. But um, tools and technology, where we are today compared to where we were then, I mean, scripted, automated gold disks were the standard, right? You create a gold disk image that DISA approved, right? They sent them out to you, and it was based on the different type of operating system, right? Whether it was server, desktop, or whatever, laptops. We were staking and hardening back then as well, every 60 days. Um, Compared to today, where we have infrastructure as code and scripted, platform as code deployments, we're slowly working towards as a government compliance as code, right? So at Stackerm, our CEO, Gaurav Pal, GP, um, yeah, he's actually leading the continuous ATO effort, and they're also working towards compliance as code. So it's in its second phase, second milestone. But yeah, so tools and technology wise, I mean, yeah, back then we had, images, gold images, scripted deployments, etc. But today, we're deploying full environments, right, with full GSS or general support systems that includes auditing, logging, scanning, antivirus, malware, patch remediation, configuration management, full zero trust, everything that is required to secure an environment. Um, to do what we're doing today, back then we probably would have they probably would have thought we were from another planet. But just to think about where we come from then.
Yeah. So you had golden images back then. It's just a lot of the standards expected things to never change ever. Like I love what Pete says, what Pete Waterman says about the the standard was written in like 2005, FISMA 2006, right? 2006, and I mean, it probably took a long time to build out that standard, but the standard was, hey, let's build out this system and let's ship it off to sea, and it's never going to change again, right? And that is absolutely not what it is today. And so um, we focus a lot on security capability, and that's why we like love our partnership with Stack Armor. That's where we connected. I'll never forget like meeting Johan also over the phone. He's like, first off, I just want to tell you I hate GRC tools, and I'm like, oh, well, that's a really nice guitar there. You got, I'm like, let's build a relationship because he's just like, you know,
That
but
does
we.
sound like Johan.
I love that guy. All right, but it is focusing on capabilities first, right? Um, so you mentioned all of those things, right? So what are you doing for log management? What are you doing for configuration management? What are you doing? Like, we need to talk through some of those and like just help people understand what it's like to not have someone who knows what's going on doing it.
Man, well,
You can just
I have
get
a
taken
customer I'm
advantage
not going
of.
to name, but I'll tell you, this was one of our early folks we took on, because Stackermer has been around for a while, but our current solution, Threat Alert, which is everything, we provide everything but the assessment. But the customer had basically said to me, I've been studying the NIST controls for 18 months.
Nice.
And I was like, yep, and you're still here. Which is to say, you can read the controls, right? There are, 22 families, 18 of them in FedRAMP, and you can read them all day long. But if you don't understand them or the spirit, not to mention the controls are part of a broader spectrum, and FedRAMP is just an overlay. So is FISMA, so is RMF. The controls can be mapped back to CMMC. You can map them to ISO. So depending on the framework and how they're applied, right? you've got to understand the expectations and what's being asked of you. So to your point, like auditing and logging, centralized auditing and logging, or the AU family in general, um, it's tough to get through to commercial companies out there who have never been through anything compliance related, much less the concept of monitoring all of this and tracking it and keeping it all in one location and then reviewing it daily, weekly, monthly, etc. Um, I will tell you the biggest part of this is training and education. And we spend the bulk of our time not deploying. That happens very quickly. Implementation and migration of a customer solution also moves quickly. What takes the most time is teaching them to fish for themselves, so to speak, right? Even though we're doing all of this, it still belongs to them and it's their responsibility. So if it wasn't for that piece, man, I think we would just be cranking them like hotcakes. But um, when you come across the customers that have had ISO, who have been through something like SOC 2 or HIPAA and high trust, who have at least some background and they've been audited, those move so much faster.
I love what you just said right there. That's really interesting. You have this opportunity, if you wanted to be like, oh yeah, let's just implement there, you're done, and then give them a sticker, right?
And a lollipop.
Yeah.
There you go.
Because there is a lot of outcome-based sales, right? Because it doesn't matter. It's 2025, and yes, we have AI that helps a little bit, but if you don't understand implementation and assurance and how those work together to build a world-class security program, you're going to be in a really tough spot. You can be taken advantage of. And so there's all these firms and tools out there, we don't have to name them, that sell this outcome of like, hey, you don't know what you're doing. That's okay. Our SaaS tool, or we're gonna do it for you. So you hate compliance? Like, great. So do we. We'll get it for you, and we'll get you a sticker, and you can put it on the forehead of your company. Like,
so I wanna double click on what you said about the AI part of it. I ran into a company the other day that did try to use AI to write it, and like they just went straight into ChatGPT, typed in a control, and it spit it out. And I've talked to a couple companies, and I'll come back around on this because I'm as ADD as Kenny. So
that's why I love this.
So I'm going to come back to that in
we
just
know
a
each
second,
other.
But just to say, like our policy is actually very, very simple. It's a one sentence policy. Never use AI for anything you can't validate. Right? That's it. You don't have to say anything else. Period. So they used ChatGPT to write their package and failed the audit miserably. They're like, but
Shocker.
I copied everything word for word.
Weird how that works.
How did we fail the audit? I was like, let me see it. And I started reading. I was like, whoa, what was the prompt? Like, so if
give me
you're an
FedRAMP.
Well,
Give me FedRAMP now.
But
Now.
this goes back to the right tools in the right hands is a powerful thing. You put ChatGPT into a senior FedRAMP consultant or previous auditor or whatever, and they're going to be able to manage 10 to 20 packages at a time because they know what they're doing. They can validate what's written and correct it. Versus somebody who's never done this, who doesn't understand the 4 C's, right? Clear, concise, consistent, complete. FedRAMP 4 C's. In addition to the who, what, when, where, and obviously the how, but those things are one of the biggest messages that the FedRAMP PMO had to get across in the early years because people were just copying and pasting the control statements and then putting, like if the control statement had a requirement around like maybe account management, right? Number of lockout attempts and things like that. They would take it, copy, paste it, put the company name in the front, and then that was it.
Yep.
The organization implements whatever, like implementation statement.
implements the following control in the
on a need-to-know basis.
But in short, I think Matt Goodrich and team did a good job in those early years. They really, believe it or not, they had to spend the bulk of their time educating the community on how to write. So they started producing like these YouTube videos and training videos, like the 300 series, 200 series, and whatnot. So they had CSP videos, agency videos, 3PAO videos on how to write a control, how to write an SSP, understanding responsibilities, and that seemed to be one of the biggest problems a PMO faced 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We see actually CMMC is kind of dealing with that now. We had a conversation just last week with the C3PAO that said they've gotten some packages that were clearly written by ChatGPT because every response is like, we deeply value security, and like
with little emojis on the side of a rocket ship and a star.
To be fair, I remember, when I was implementing FedRAMP, I was talking to, 3PAOs and people in the PMO at that time that were saying I'm like, wait a minute, let me get this straight. If I just write that my company implements this, basically the statement, I'm just going to regurgitate that, then it's not a documentation issue. But I'm explaining to you how I implement it, right below. And, that totally makes sense. I'm explaining, you asked me, what is the solution and how is it implemented? But you're saying, if I just say this statement up here, that the lockout and all that stuff and deny by default and all these other words that are, I'm like, it's in the freaking control. I'm like, you're telling me that if I do that, then we're good. And they'd be like, yes. And I'd be like, wow, that's crazy. I think it's different now.
I remember those moments, and I also remember what we used to, so I'm probably going to be hated for this by the people that know this, but we used to say that the PMO was like a box of chocolates because you never know what you're going to get.
On the day.
Yes. On a daily basis. And we went down this road of early on of saying, okay, I'm going to email info at FedRAMP. Here's the question before we implement and deploy this, because there's some ambiguity a little bit to the control. And we're like, okay, if we do it this way, will you perceive an issue? And get a response back. Yes, if you do it that way, that will be accepted, blah, blah, blah. But then a 3PO comes along and says, and you're like, email. So then you show them it, and they're like, well, I guess if the 3PO said it's okay, then you get back in front of the PMO, and they're like, we never said, no, go back and fix it. And so that wasn't uncommon. And that's a 6-month turnaround you're talking about too. Then you got pissed off customers, you got struggles. And so I've been on both sides, so assessment and advisor. And from the last, decade plus of doing FedRAMP, it's been a process of, once it's accepted and widely accepted, right, that becomes the gold standard. It's solidified, and those controls stay that way. And what's interesting is as you train new consultants who see it and read it and want to improve it, and I'm like, it's not broken. Do not fix that statement. You leave it the way it is. But I don't understand. All right, I'll explain it, but you're not changing it. So, we achieved that approach. But to your point, Kenny, the implementation can be incorrectly written, but not implemented, right? So as long as it's deployed correctly, configured correctly, and implemented, you can get past those PL2 findings from an SSP perspective. What you can't have is a terrible implementation that's well documented, right? And so it's that scenario that I think we ran into for a number of years where people were just so focused on writing an immaculate package, which there is no such thing, but they would write a fantastic SSP that was glorious, and then the system just had holes all over it.